Hello and welcome to the Jaggy Thistle. My name is Kenny Farquharson. I'm your host for these wee chats about Scottish politics, Scottish culture. And today I want to talk to you about a play I went to on Monday night. And this was the big festival show put on by the National Theatre of Scotland. The Festival Theatre, almost 2,000 people every night watching Brian Cox doing a cameo in this big, ambitious play about the fall of the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, and the consequences of it. And the man at the heart of that, Fred Goodwin, formerly Sir Fred Goodwin, known as Fred the Shred. And this was a kind of big kind of state of the nation play of the kind that the National Theatre of Scotland are really good at. So, what was it like? Did it deliver the goods? I think it did. There was a moment in the play when the actor playing Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, is furious and demanding that Goodwin is dragged from the Gogarburn headquarters of RBS in handcuffs. And I could have stood up and kind of punched the air at that point, because that's exactly what I would have wanted. Obviously, I didn't stand up and punch the air. It's kind of frowned upon in the dress circle of the Festival Theatre in Edinburgh during August. Not my colleagues would have been black affronted if I'd done so. But the thought was there. The whole evening, it felt like a therapy session, because Edinburgh, middle class Edinburgh in particular, lived through the hubris and the nemesis of the RBS saga. We were there for the good times. The city was booming. The Scottish Parliament had just been set up. There was a kind of air of self-congratulation and a little bit up. There was an upbeat feeling about the city. The Royal Bank was the biggest bank in the world. It kind of we could do no wrong. We were a global player. House prices were rising. There was kind of Michelin stars sprinkled all over the Edinburgh eateries. And the city felt very good about itself. Scotland kind of felt good about itself, albeit with all the problems that were going on as well. And so as a result, the crash, when it came, was felt very personally by everybody in the city, and I think more broadly in Scotland as well, but particularly in Edinburgh. This was a company town for many years, and the company was doing rather well. So, watching all this play out on stage, it was a very Greek thing. There was as I said, the hubris, the nemesis. And as a result of watching that on the stage, there was a sense of catharsis. And I kind of get that some of the English, London-based theatre critics weren't quite convinced by this play. The Times and the Guardian both gave it just 3 stars, and I think they must have felt a little bit like interlopers in a communal act of therapy, because that's what this was. It was us working through all that was going on. The RBS story is an extraordinary story on any level, on kind of political level, social level, economic level. I have a friend who worked for the bank at a high level during the crisis, and he talked about the day where it all came to a head. And he was in the RBS headquarters in London, and just to clear his head, he went out for a breath of air. And there was a news vendor on the corner selling the Evening Standard, and my pal went over and tried to buy a copy and handed the guy an RBS fiver, and the guy said, "Oh no, mate, that's worthless. They've gone bust." Because that was the story on the front page of the paper, and the bank was on the verge of collapse. So it was an extraordinary moment, and the play's very good at making it clear that this was a problem, a crisis brought about by Scottish bankers enthralled to the ideas, however misunderstood, of a Scottish economist, Adam Smith. And the problem ultimately solved by Scottish politicians. Gordon Brown, Alistair Darling was the Chancellor at the time. Brown was in number 10. Arguably Brown's finest moment, although obviously the deregulation he authorised earlier when he was Chancellor helped contribute to the crisis. But when the moment came, everyone recognises, I think, from Obama downwards, that it was Brown's force of personality more than anything else, but also his intellectual grasp of the peril that the international finance situation, banking situation, international banking system was in. What needed to be done, and he forged the solution. So this was a problem made in Scotland and solved by Scots. And slightly ironic that this is a play written by an Englishman, James Graham, fantastic playwright, responsible for all these kind of TV and stage plays which are about the mores and the politics and the social climate of Britain today, from Brexit, the Uncivil War. He wrote the great play This House, which is a fantastic play, fantastic on the page as well as on stage, about the dying days of the Labour government in the 1970s. He wrote Dear England, which is this fantastic thing, which I think is coming to it was National Theatre coming to television about the English international football team. But some people might resent an Englishman unpicking our flaws as a nation, but I think he's done us a favour. It's an extraordinary piece of work, and I look forward to actually it being. He publishes his plays through Methven, and I think that this will work very well on the page as well. But my main reaction to this play, this night at the theatre, was anger. I wrote about it in the Times, and I'll put a link to what I wrote in the notes to this video. But I was still angry when I was writing my column. That was the morning after. Why was I angry? I was angry for a couple of reasons mainly. Firstly, I was angry that Goodwin never was dragged out of Gogarburn in handcuffs as Gordon Brown wanted. In the Times recently there was a story that said that despite having his pension halved and his knighthood stripped away from him, Goodwin still lives a very comfortable life in Edinburgh. His pension, with inflation, is probably back up to about 600 grand a year for a pension. Apparently, he plays golf at Archer Field. He goes shooting. He has a collection of classic cars that he tinkers with. So, that in my view, he should be in Sochten. There were crimes committed against this country, frankly, that people are still paying the price of. And the public realm of this nation, Scotland and the UK, was hollowed out by the austerity that was caused by the banking crisis in 2008. And that's the life chances of millions of children damaged and diminished because of the folly, greed, and recklessness of this one man. Not acting alone, it has to be said, but enabled by a whole class of people around him. The boards and the advisors and the employees and the consultants and the people who didn't do their jobs properly, the people who turned a blind eye, the people who hid the toxic assets. There are lots of culpable people in this city, still operating in this city, who've never really had their comeuppance. But Goodwin in particular has never had his comeuppance. And the, you know, so that was one reason for my anger. The other reason is to do with Nigel Farage. And Farage, the reason Farage comes into it is that 2008 always comes up. Every analysis of the rise of the insurgent, populist, nationalist hard right in Britain today starts with 2008, starts with the banking crisis. Okay, there were things that happened afterwards. There was COVID, there was Brexit, there was Liz Truss and everything else that caused, that damaged the fabric of the nation. But the rupture, the start of the rupture of between the people and the political elites, not just the political elites, all elites, the rupture in confidence and in faith that people of goodwill were trying to do their best for the country, that happened, that has its roots in 2008 and has never really been reconciled or addressed in a way that is satisfactory for the people who feel let down, abandoned, left behind, while other people thrived. It's as simple as that. It's as stark as that. So the populist harvest that we reap today in Britain today was the seeds of that were sown in Gogarburn back in the start of this century. And this plays very good at recognising that. If I have a criticism, it's that the economic, social, political consequences of 2008 are not really kind of drawn out in this play. It's more up to that point. Perhaps, I think Graham perhaps thought that could go unsaid. I think it needed said. I think, you needed, metaphorically, Goodwin to look these people in the eyes whose life chances had been diminished by the results of his actions. So RBS was the Darien of our age. The Darien disaster was when vast amounts of Scotland's wealth were invested in a colony in South America, which turned out to be a flea-bitten, disease-ridden swamp, and we lost all our money in that. This is an equivalent. It's kind of, you can, if you want to kind of name the Scottish disasters, from kind of Darien, Flodden, Culloden, Gogarburn. It deserves its place in that list, frankly. It's our modern day disaster. But the crucial thing, the crucial lesson for me, at any rate, was that the final chapter of the Gogarburn disaster story has still to be written. And that chapter is when that great rupture of confidence and faith in the British people with the institutions and the governments that control their lives and influence and oversee their lives, that great rupture leads to the rise of a hard right populist insurgency in the form of Nigel Farage. And how that plays out is still to be seen. How that chapter ends, we've still to see. But this show does it very well. I recommend it to you. I don't think it has too many days left, but I'm sure it'll come back. There was a point in the night I went, it was Monday night, and there's a moment where Gordon Brown, the character playing Gordon Brown, is kind of woebegone and kind of miserable and lamenting the fact that, you know, seriousness in politics was no longer the defining virtue of what people wanted from their politicians. There was a guy in the stalls shouted, "Hear, hear," which was momentarily threw the actors off. I'm not sure the crowd participation was something they were expecting in the show, but maybe they should have been, because this was, as I say, something that went to the heart of the experience, in you know, and the very lived experience, and we lived this in real time. Only you know, 15 years ago, you know, we watched this happen. We felt this happen. This was ultimately a play about us, and all the better for it. So I commend it to you, and thank you for your interest listening to this, and I hope you enjoyed this wee chat. Put your comments in the comments boxes underneath this, wherever you find them. This is obviously the Jaggy Thistle, a conversation in a community. Always interested to hear what you've got to say, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.